Think of a situation, a life, where you didn't have to live up to anything at all, where you didn't have to live up to your own ideas about yourself, of who you are, of what you should achieve in life, of what you should do. And equally, think of how your life would be different if you didn't have to live up to an ideal, to a plan, in order to please other people. In order to not have a standard, how would your life be if you didn't have a standard that said, this will always be unconscious, you'll never know about it until you start to work on yourself, that says, I must behave in a certain way toward you, and you, and you. I must behave toward society in a certain way. Now, if your life is strained and burdened and in conflict, it is because you do have these ideas as to what you must live up to, how you should behave. Now, why do you have any... let's get an objection out of the way. Someone new may be listening to this tape who has not heard these ideas before, and they may be wondering about it. When you go to work in the morning, or when you get up in the morning and take care of your home, part of your inner work is to be just as sharp, as efficient, as clever, use what word you want, in doing your daily work. Be a real good salesman at work. Be a good merchandiser. Be a good businessman, an honest one. Don't be deceptive. But be a superior worker if you can be, in your own mind, not superior in the sense of competition. This is not living up to a standard of what others expect of you. This is living up to your natural self, which, when it is free of all phony ideals and ideas, is efficient, sharp, real fast in making right judgments on the everyday level, and it is completely effortless. You don't have to think for 1 second, how am I going to be more efficient in my work today? For one thing, you will understand the 1,001, I'm still talking about your daily work and around the home. For one thing, you'll understand how life operates on the everyday level, at business or in the home socially, so that you don't try to do what it is impossible to do, which means when all that is out of the way, then you operate with 100% efficiency in your work. Where there is a block in your work, if a customer says no to you trying to sell him a car or whatever you sell, then that's the end of it. That's the absolute end of it, because there's no lost efficiency or energy in you being disappointed that you didn't sell him the car. When you are right within yourself, there's no disappointment about anything on the everyday level. Because if you do the best you can, then you will begin to understand what you can't do and what you must not try to do, such as trying to persuade someone in order for you to get what you want from them. If you're in sales work, then what would you do? And it's good, honest sales work. You're selling lumber down at the lumber shop. Then what would you do? You would present the facts to the customer. This wood is from Oregon, pine wood, and it's good for building homes, but you wouldn't want to use it for something else. You're stating the facts. You're honest yet. You're still honest, right? You haven't told any fibs about it. I'm 5 feet tall and weigh 300 pounds. That is my problem. And if you make a problem out of that, that is your problem. I'm going to take care of my problem, of my growing old, of losing my hair or growing gray or whatever it might be. You're responding to all this, aren't you? I'm going to take the leap in the dark and say, I'm going to find myself and not get my attention off the wrong things, trying to please you, trying to hold you by trying to be physically attractive, which never works and it won't work anyway, and do the right thing. All right, you may comment from this point on. All right, I'll say one more thing. You have to go a long, 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 long ways.
Well, I know one thing that because this goes back way back at first grade from there on, that I've always been very frightened, like a very frightened child, with the opposite sex, especially with the opposite sex. But I have never been able to conquer this feeling, never. I don't know what it is.
You mean shyness and other things like that? Timidity,
But
not knowing.
not only that, there are other feelings that I don't know what they are.
All right.
I become frightened, that's all.
No. Who'll comment on that? He said that in meeting girls that he's frightened and uncertain of himself. Why? Why? You should know. You tell me.
Well, isn't it because he's still relating to himself as an I?
Sure. Always a self-reference there. You want, for example, to impress them. Look, naturally, in the physical level, you have a sex center. See, that's natural. It's quite normal. You wouldn't be normal without it. So you've got it. And this enters into it. But it's all mixed up. It's all confused. And maybe you even feel guilty about it or ashamed of yourself, which is wrong. See, you don't understand that just as much as you have a minor given, you were given the sex parts too. See? So there's no problem, except as we get it all mixed up and get stupidly embarrassed about it, ashamed about it, or something like that. That's one part of it. And that's very powerful. Sex is a very powerful thing. And I told you before, you bring this into it. You watch your thoughts about this, any kind of thoughts, desire, shame, or whatever. You watch that. It's very important. If you can get through this, it will carry 10 other problems away with it, because it connects with so many others. Repression, so on. You should repress nothing.
Why don't we just stay on this for a while?
Pardon?
Why don't we just stay on this subject for a while?
Would you like to stay on the subject of sex?
So we can get through it.
All right. All right. You speak out something that you have been reluctant to talk about, maybe, in any way at all?
Well, for instance, we were taught as children to grow up, and one marriage was supposed to make you complete.
All right.
People find they have other desires that they don't necessarily get along. And this creates a tremendous guilt. When the separation comes along, there's a tremendous guilt associated with it, and because this was supposed to have been the perfect relationship, but it didn't turn out that way. This was where you found sex. This is where you found your fulfillment in another, and
Yes.
there's a tremendous amount of guilt.
Well, when I started to think about this many years ago, I realized there was something wrong with the way people function in sex. They use it as an escape, or they use it to get rid of their anxiety. And now, when people do function in a sex relationship, should there be no I in there? Is it the same way as being free of everything else? If you're free of everything else,
You're
then you
free.
can be free in a
That's
sex
right.
relationship. If you feel that you're free, then, and you're functioning with a person who isn't free, then there's conflict.
Why? In you?
Well,
I understand. I'm seeing everything, if I may say so. Do you want to be in charge of sex, or do you want it to be in charge of you?
in charge of me.
Hmm?
In charge of me.
You want to be in charge, do you not? When I say you, I
No.
mean,
Do I want to be in charge?
don't you want to be in charge of everything?
Not me.
All right, if you're using me in the ordinary sense. All right. Let's take about 12 different departments of your life. You have work down at the office with the boss and the people you work with. You have a home life. You have a life with your children in their school affairs. You have a sex life. You have a life of what you do in order to relax. You go to the mountains and so on. All these are different departments of your life, so to speak. Do you want to be in charge of every one of them? What I don't want you to say that you don't want to be in charge. Why do you say you don't want to be in charge of everything? I'm talking about you in the universal sense.
Oh, then you have to be in charge.
All right. Let's remember that when we say you, let's be careful we use it in the right sense. Otherwise, we're going to awfully confuse. When I say you, generally, we just mean you. So, I don't want anything to overcome me. Remember we talked about the children getting in trouble? I want to be in charge of that situation because I am free. When I'm free, I am in charge of everything. I don't have, listen, I don't have anything that is compulsive. The whole man, listen, the whole unified man is in charge of the parts. If a part takes over, chaos. And if one part takes over, other parts will go mad. This is what a psychopath is. He's maybe a sex psychopath or a political psychopath, you name it. Other parts of him will go mad too because they're all separated. A self-unified man, a one man, is in charge of every department. See? This is why we're saying, let's be in charge of ourselves first and not give concern to this, oh boy, I lost 3 pounds last week, but oh boy, I'll probably gain them back this Christmas. Those kind of thoughts have no place whatever in our inner work. The kind of thoughts that have to do with our inner work is, how can I get over the illusion that thought can do anything for me? So that I can see that there's something else besides conditioned thought, acquired thought, mechanical thought. And there is something else, which is the whole person, which includes mechanical thought. But that part, mechanical thinking, does not take over as the whole. This is what egotism is. When mechanical thought says, I can achieve success in the stock market, or I did. I started on a shoestring and now I have $5 million. You didn't do a single thing because you do not exist as a separate self that can operate on the stock market. And you didn't win that beautiful woman or that handsome husband. You were born with certain maybe attractive physical attributes. And because you didn't understand the part that played in your whole life, you married a psychopath. Now you wonder why you're miserable. When I don't have any compulsions in sex, I am free of it. And I can have it or I can be without it for the rest of my life. I can have it the rest of my life or I can be without it the rest of my life. Because I'm not going to be a slave of anything. You see, you don't believe me when I say anything. You think there are exceptions.
No,
Okay.
I believe that.
Remember, I said yesterday that God, truth, reality, doesn't have any problems. I and my Father are one. The kingdom of heaven is within. Therefore, if I have died to my false ideas about my identity and I have nothing left of that, then who am I? I am not just a part of the whole. You can use that phrase as long as you understand, but you are the whole. Where there are parts, there is opposition, there is division. You and I are all one thing with a capital O, no division. Therefore, the part, whether it's sex or the home problem or a health problem, does not take over and take command in the name of the whole, because it is simply a part. And when the whole takes over, then the parts work as they should work. And they'll work alternately. Just like sometimes you're hungry, sometimes you're not. But there's no compulsion. To be compelled is a terrible thing, isn't it? Isn't it terrible to be compelled to behave toward a person in a certain way, someone that you're afraid of, someone that you want someone from? Have you ever, look, I'll give you a project. During the next few weeks, the rest of your life, you watch your behavior towards someone that you want something from, or that's someone you fear. I'll give you a choice there. Someone you want something from or someone you fear. You watch your behavior and you will see that you are their slave. Really your slave, but for Wilf we'll say it for now. You are their slave. And if you watch further, deeper than that, you will be able to detect yourself doing dumb things in order to please them, making little flattering remarks so that they will like you and maybe you'll get what you want, something like that. You watch this and then you say, that's out from now on. If I have to lose the benefit, in quote marks, I'm going to lose it. And when you see that it's a false move, it'll fall away of itself. It can't possibly hang on to you. When you see it, you really see it. You understand? You have to see it. And it's easy to deceive ourselves into thinking that we see it. You'll know you've seen it when it falls away of itself, without effort on your part. Your part is to understand. All the other work belongs to natural flow of life, a natural healing process. We are healing ourselves naturally here in this group. And it won't come back. Once healed, never come back. Never. It's impossible. Once you've made this through this one door, whatever level it may be, maybe it's the 10th door in 500 doors, once you've really made it through, it's impossible to go back to the 9th or 8th or 1st again. God can't lose a thing. Then, whatever this problem used to be will not be on your mind anymore at all. We had the illustration in our talk up at Boulder City, this following, which I'll repeat. Think of a man who is not an alcoholic, who doesn't drink, nothing, you understand? Nothing. He gets up in the morning and goes through his day. Not once during the entire day does he think, should I take a drink? No, I better not take a drink. Maybe should I? Well, I'll wait till 5 and then take a drink. It's not on his mind. We said he is not an alcoholic. It's not in him. Throughout your day, when you can do so, not when driving a car, certainly. You do that when you can find a second for it, even if you have a spare minute walking down between buildings at work, around the house. Don't think about anything at all, which does not mean you're asleep. It means you're quite aware of where you're going, where you're walking. But it means you're not, perhaps, in this daydream, or in this hostile thought, or in this worried thought. You begin to see the difference between thinking and not thinking at all, which is still being wide awake. You may have to, 5 seconds later, think, it's 10 o'clock, I have to go to the grocery store. Then maybe, if you're walking down to the car to go to the grocery store, you can interrupt this thought long enough to simply be conscious of yourself feeling the push of the cement on the bottom of your shoe. And maybe that's the first time in your life you've ever felt cement pushing up against the sole of your shoe. You have a new impression that you've never ever had before. This is all part of your work, of being aware of ourselves. See, why are we becoming more conscious of ourselves? Watching our gestures, watching our thoughts, watching our feelings, our facial expression. We're becoming conscious of ourselves so that we can no longer be conscious of ourselves, so that we can forget ourselves. See? This is why we're doing this, not to build anything up. But there's certain steps. It's very logical. There's logic in this. Step 1, step 2, A, B, C. So we're going through the first ABCs so that we end up at XYZ, in which we see that we do not have to think about ourselves, take no thought for tomorrow. And the reason that the things of tomorrow, you don't have to take thought about the things of tomorrow, because there's no point in it. There's not a single thing you can do or need to do about tomorrow. Because, listen to this now, you listen. Because you are tomorrow. You are tomorrow. You are tomorrow. I am tomorrow. If I'm living there, if I'm staying there, and right now, then when there's no division any longer between me and tomorrow, where's the problem? On the everyday level, I know what to do. I have my mind for that. I have habit thought for that. I have acquired thoughts that I have to be at work at 8 o'clock. What's the problem? I'll be at work at 8 o'clock. But there's no fear. There's no problem. I and now are one. If I try to take thought for tomorrow, In order to protect my I, my false sense of self, you finish the sentence for me. I'm living in time. I'm setting up protection, and there will be a clash. Tomorrow, 3 men are considered for the promotion, and I think I'm the top man. Dear, sitting across the dinner table from me, I think I've got a good chance. If I get it or don't get the promotion, I've hurt myself, I've injured myself, because I think it's essential for me to get this promotion.
We don't flow with events. Yes, that be today, you are today, or we are tomorrow.
Right.
So I have to go to work at 8 o'clock. I bring my mind to interfere with that. So I'm contradicting it. I mean, I will not want to be today. So bring my mind and contradict that part of the work during the day.
Did you say I'm resenting tomorrow? Am I got you right?
Right.
Uh-huh.
I will not let it flow the way it wants to, you know.
Oh, yeah. I'm getting myself in the way long before the actual in human time happens. Therefore, I am interfering with it.
Right.
I didn't. Yeah. Excuse me.
Right.
No. If I didn't interfere, all would be well. But the false self always wants to interfere because it's trying to get something out of it. Even, do you realize that resentment is very valuable to the false sense of self? Hatred is very valuable. Jealousy is very, put it in quote marks, the word valuable to it, because without these it could have no existence. It would wither away and die, which is what we're working on, to see that these are false moves on our part in order to hang on to what I call myself. Okay? If you're worried about anything at all, I said anything, troubled, anxious, nervous about anything at all, it is because you have given your mind over to your conditioning, to your past, to time, to another human being, to your own desires, to your own misunderstandings. Any worry at all means that I have abandoned my original mind, my pure mind, my originally pure mind, my original nature, to something foreign. I've gone wandering off into foreign lands. So I have to bring myself back. So every time you do get concerned about something, self-concern, you bring this thought back to you and say, the reason I'm worried, anything, is because I have abandoned my original mind, which is just as pure as anybody else's who has ever found themselves. There's no difference between your mind and those of certain people who have found themselves. It's just that you and I still have the heavy overcoats, the trash over them, which is what we're working to eliminate. And when we see this and drop the trash, where's the problem? What is there to do except to, on one level, carry out the daily duties I have to get bread on the table, and other than that, live as a free human being? No, it isn't dull. You were living a dull life. You were living a dull life out there if you haven't found this. But you call dullness excitement. And this is the way you live, from one alternating between excitement and depression. And you can't have one without the other. And just before you woke up this morning, can you remember what your thoughts were? Were you watching enough to be, not necessarily us, you can if you want. Do you recall your thoughts as you fell off to sleep last night and when you got up? Do you remember them? Can you recall what they were? Were you watching at the moment? If not, you should have been watching, right? Did any of you at all? Please, let me see your hand if you recall. Would you like to comment in any way, Juan?
If I can remember.
Well, as best you can. If you don't, just say so. That's all right. You don't have to if you don't want to.
Well, first I was thinking of certain things about the tape recorder, whether I took this with me, the cord, or not. You know, whether I can stay here, or whether I took it and put it in the car, because I usually do that. I leave certain things, you know. So, but I was observing it. It's worrying eyes, so we're always worrying about something. You know.
Worried, yes.
Yeah. Could be many little things. There was some others.
Right.
Whether I said a few things to certain people, whether they could have been real, I was too blunt with them. About
Might have offended them maybe or
right,
something.
right. So I was.
All right. All right. Anyone else? Rudy?
Well, this morning, I've been trying to work on the work project. It is to jump out of bed as soon as I
Jump
wake
out
up.
of bed.
But I don't.
I'm a witness of it.
I don't want to upset myself. Because
All right.
I know if I jump out of it,
It's going to shock you.
it's going to shock me.
Of course it is. Of course it is. Now that's good. That's great. That's what you want, is this shock. You know why? You remember shocks. You'll never remember rolling out of bed lazily and sleepy and, oh boy, 4 minutes yet before I have to get up, and it goes in 4 seconds, doesn't it? You look again and it's time to get up. You'll never learn a thing. So next time, Rudy, jump out, give yourself a shock, and you'll remember that shock, and that is where you grow from. You'll be able to do it easier next time. You should be able to, when you wake up in the morning, let's see if you do this. You should be, are we all right, Juan? You should be able to, when you first wake up in the morning, get right on up. There is a physical, natural, yes, but forget that, or you use that as an alibi. You should be able to, when you wake up, get right up, be physically conscious so you don't bump into the dark table next to you. And then that's part of your work too. You should be able to get right out of bed without any thinking about it or resistance to it or laziness. Go against the laziness of your physical body as part of your work. Right up, and you should be wide awake when your feet hit that floor. You should hit the floor consciously, so that you don't start the day with all these negative thoughts that maybe have been running through your mind all night long. You should get up and walk out and then turn the coffee on consciously. And you should never go to sleep again the rest of the day. How's that for a tall order?
Never go to sleep the rest of the
Yeah.
day.
Yes, but you understand that being in mechanical thought when it is necessary is not being asleep. Yes.
I find that a lot of the ideas that are discussed here and that I read about and hear on the tape seem to crystallize very early in the morning as I'm coming out of the physical sleep. A lot of things seem to be very clear with me, and then I lie there trying to either hold on to them or perhaps understand them a little better or get more of them. And I'm reluctant to bring myself to a full awakening process and getting out of bed. Once I get out of bed, a lot of these feelings or understandings seem to disappear. Is this a false thing, or is
Well, you'd have to tell us the actual nature of your thoughts. You can be thinking rightly, perhaps. You'll have to judge for yourself what those thoughts were and try to separate between daydreaming type of thoughts, or maybe you can even be deceiving yourself into thinking it's a inner work thought when it really isn't. You have to judge that, see? Because you know what your own thoughts are, and we don't. I have to judge my own. And you have to look very sharply and be able to distinguish what is the nature of this thought. If you're laying there, and maybe you're trying to think about something. If you're thinking, for example, not this morning I'm going to get up and be wide awake as I wake up and go turn the coffee on while being wide awake. That is a good thought. That is thinking, but it's a good thought. That came from memory because you heard it at a class sometime. You just have to look and distinguish for yourself. Yes?
Ken, you get out groggy and you aware of it. I get out groggy.
Well,
I was aware of it this morning. I was aware of being groggy.
all right, I said that at the beginning, but I don't want anyone to use it wrongly. Your physical body may be still quite lazy. I'm saying if you're mentally awake, that's the main thing. Your body will follow along in a minute. Don't let the body take over your mind is what one thing we're trying to say, because it will every time if you let it. That's a terrible thing, to be a slave to your physical body.
I'd like to comment on getting up in the morning. There's no problem for me. So I lay down to watch my guilt.
Yeah.
Guilt, because I always have guilt of not doing enough, being lazy. You know, that I have to go to something. Fire to the apple, you know, serve everything. You know, that I was not doing enough for the work.
Mm-hmm. Do you owe something to the work?
To the world.
Oh, excuse me. Oh,
Before I came
you're not doing enough for the world?
Just before I came into
Oh, I see. And this was all
always had-
guilt.
I always
I
had
see.
that.
I'm sorry, I understand. Mhm. That's because we still think that we can do something for the world, but it's all self-centered. It is me doing. I can save the world. I can contribute a ray of sunshine in this dark world and all this other nonsense. As part of your work on your mind and watching your thought processes, how often during the day can you catch yourself, I'm going to state it very simply and you'll know what I'm talking about. How often can you catch yourself simply talking to yourself, engaging in see lots of nods, just engaging in an idle conversation or recreating a conversation with someone else that had gone on an hour or a day ago, recreating it and running it through your mind again. Now I'll tell you one main reason why this, well, there's many reasons, but let's take one of them. One, because there's a good deal of the I in it. I said that. I said to him, I said to the boss, and even if the boss won the argument, it's a great distraction because you are still opposed to the boss and you still exist. There's also often, not always, it depends on it, you judge for yourself, a lot of emotion in there. And as long as you have all this false emotion in your own self-dialogue, self-conversations, you don't have to face the realities that you don't want to face, which is that, look, it's startling but interesting. I'm walking down the street, and I'm able to be in my mental center for the moment because I'm not crossing a busy street, and I see my mind engaged in a conversation. See? Now, I exist as the person who is talking to the boss. This is my security, and I don't have to face the fact that I am not at all this person talking to the boss. You really are not. You really are not this person arguing with the boss and telling him off with your wife or husband, if you want to substitute that. You have to face the fact that this idiot who is blabbing all this time doesn't really exist. But you have to have, we have to have the courage to see that there is an idiot there in the first place. Because as long as he's taking the place of our real self, we must have all the problems connected with this blabbing idiot. Can you think of times during the last 24 hours when you or someone else just sat down and blabbed and blabbed and blabbed without stopping? You'll never get out as long as you have to blab all the time. And suppression is not the same thing as non-blabbing, because your mind is going 90 miles an hour while your lips are silent, because you were knocked down as a kid for talking too much, and so you just suppressed it. Right? Watch mental blabbing in ourselves. This is a part of the daydream factor, the beautiful daydream where I said something that was impressive to the girl I'm trying to impress.
Is it usually an insult or a flattery that we think about? If somebody insults us or if someone flatters us?
Yes, very, very often. We just love emotion. We'd rather have what we call a pleasurable emotion than a painful one. But if we can't have the pleasurable one, then we will settle for the painful one every time. This is why complaint becomes very valuable to us, to a lost human being. You know what I mean by lost. Without complaint, he would be no one. I'm sure that you did not mean to see goodness where it doesn't exist,
No.
which is what bothering me
Right.
too, you understand? Yeah. And I caught that immediately, and I didn't want to interfere because I'm not quite sure what you had in mind. You might have explained it in detail. What you were really saying is see the opposites. That's what you were getting at, but in order to destroy it. But it can get confusing. So for heaven's sake, that's the last thing we want to do, is to see goodness where it doesn't exist. Or to see goodness because we were told that this is what goodness is. Goodness is not worshiping Adolf Hitler, although billions or millions of people thought so at one time. See the person as he is. Boy, how clear this becomes.
Yeah, but without labeling and without judging and without calling it good or bad, just see it.
Just see it. Yes, that's what we're saying, yes.
So when you're either looking for goodness or bad, then you're labeling or you're dividing or you're judging.
Right, right. That's coming out of your conditioning. If 500 youths in Germany were conditioned that Adolf Hitler was a god, then their conditioning and the labels would stand in the way and say there is a wonderful human being. Which means that they will now have to share the destruction of labeling and of worshiping a human being. Don't worship anyone. Anyone. Don't worship the opposite sex. Don't you dare attribute goodness to them where it doesn't exist. If they do that, and if they return that to you, then boy, what a fight you're going to have. When we're not living from ourselves, we always look for a savior. Human or a group, maybe a social cause becomes our savior, our God, and we lose ourselves in it. And that's just what happens to us. We lose ourselves. You see a lot of that going on at this particular time of year, don't you? Let me ask you a question, and do raise your hand for once, deliberately, if you will, please. I want to find out something, and you may be right or you may be wrong, but let's see for... I'm going to be very strong about this. Do you know a psychopath when you see one? Hmm?
Yes.
Do you understand? I'm not talking about someone in a mental institution, necessarily. I'm not going to comment on this. I want you to work on it yourself. You learn to see a psychopath, know a psychopath when you see one. Boy, will your life change. Remember what we said about well-dressed men and women? With labels on their coats? The way you do this, the way I do this, is to get the psychopath out of me. And you get the psychopath out of you, and then you won't have to work at it at all.
We have to see it on ourselves, right? We have to go to that plane and see ourselves as we are, and then
Who the madness? And what do we call it? We called it goodness, we called it morality, we called it helping mankind, we called it spreading the gospel. Say to yourself, I'm going to see what happens. Don't prejudge what happens. Don't say this should happen or shouldn't happen. Say, I'm going to see what happens, including what happens to me, by not behaving the ways I usually behave. Just say that much. Do you understand this so far? Instead of snapping back at you when you snap at me, I'm going to see what happens when I don't snap back. That'll produce a shock in you. Instead of yearning over this person or position I lost, or that I barely missed and could have had, the sale which would have given me $1,000 commission, that girlfriend or boyfriend or husband and wife that I just might have had, but I goofed up at the wrong minute. I didn't play my role quite right. And I forgot my lines and all that. What will happen to me if I don't expect anything at all? Therefore, I don't have to play a role. I don't have to remember my lines. And I sit there and let the roof cave in on me. Let it cave in on you and see what happens. Many things will happen, including your relationships with other people. You will not send as many letters as you usually send to other people, and cards and stuff, because you're no longer trading with them. So that you can look, and the mailman is across the street, and you're watching your own mind. Now, I've been watching him for years. If he turns left after that house, that means I don't get anything. If he turns right, I get something. And I hope it's first class instead of fourth class. All this sort of nonsense and waste of it. You respond. You do this. This is all gone from your life. The next time this happens, go ahead and look at the mailman. You go ahead and look at him. And watch your tension, left or right. My life depends on it. Now you watch your response, whether he turns left or right. And if you get pleasure out of him coming toward your house, that's just as bad as your disappointment when he goes to the neighbor's house and you don't get anything. You're getting an emotional response from it. So you practice this in your own ways, maybe actually this way. And you watch yourself standing there. And now, remember we said you mustn't use a teaspoon to knock the door down, but a sledgehammer. Get the sledgehammer out and say, get emotional. Get real excited. Now, you get emotional. I said get emotional. And say, I am not going to be the slave to whether that guy turns left or right out there anymore. Then from there, you'll get back to see where the slavery really is. Rise up in rebellion and find 50 things like this to work with every day. So that you're not a slave anymore. Do you want to be a slave? Then you live like your neighbor does. If you don't, then work real hard on this.
Yeah, you're right on that. About a beautiful house. I could be driving and see a nice house. Oh, what a beautiful house. You know what was behind that? I wish it was mine.
Well, sure.
I use those innocent words, but if I'm not watching, I won't see that.
It's possessiveness.
That's right.
Yeah.
I have to be very careful. And those words doesn't, you won't see nothing out of the words, but you keep looking, there's something behind that.
The key word is self-reference. It all refers back to me, what I call me. If I wasn't there, I could look at the house, but I wouldn't be pained over it, or wouldn't be jealous of the man who owns it, or anything else. Maybe a house isn't your problem. Maybe you really don't particularly care whether you have a new house or a new car, but you've got other areas. You may have an ambition. See, you're smiling back there. You may have other areas where you have ambitions.
We were smiling together.
They were smiling together. Where you want something. Maybe it's a matter of security. It all depends on how badly we want out of it. How badly do you want out of it? Why don't you just talk up and tell me how badly you want out? If you do,
I went out, so that's why I want to get hurt as much as possible. But hurt myself.
Yeah.
Just false ideas. I go and do it myself. I know what I'm afraid of. So I'll go out and do them. I mean, some of them are too big, but I think little ones first,
Yeah. Do you see the opportunity in hurt? All our life we have wasted hurt. Just wasted it. It's gold. But we didn't know it. We hated hurt because we didn't understand the message it was trying to tell us. Hurt is trying to tell me that I am out of touch with reality. You phrase it any way you want. That I'm living an illusion. That I'm mixed up. That I'm neurotic. Hurt is trying to tell me this. Any kind of hurt. Not physical. We're talking about mental, emotional hurt. If I pay attention to it and say this is a great teacher, and I'm going to listen to it and watch it and find out what's going on, the hurt will destroy itself. This is a rule. Hurt properly used will end itself. It has to. Because it has no life in itself except in our illusions as we give it force, as we give it power. The most familiar phrase there, which I'll repeat, is that no one can hurt you without your permission. I have given permission to you to hurt me by my false reaction to it. So, your best friends are your worst enemies in the work, if you're working with yourself. And it may be a person out there who starts the challenge, of course, but the enemy is right in here. So that's where we begin to destroy him. And, as was brought out, don't let the label stand in the way of the challenge. And that's an endless amount of work in itself, just to see where the word stands in the way of seeing perhaps the feeling. I may think that I'm thrilled by you. What I'm thrilled at is the fact that you are so much smarter than I am that now I can abandon my responsibility for thinking for myself and put myself in your hands. You're a representative of God, maybe, or of some social cause. And now I can just have no responsibility for myself and behave like a madman because you are the strong one. Anyone you follow like that is just as weak as you are, or as I am. Madmen following madmen. That's what society is like.
Getting back to the psychopath, it really struck me because I really relate back to myself. All the psychopathic tendencies I felt I had in wrong relationships and getting caught up into so much madness that was unnecessary. And now when I sit back and watch the psychopaths around me,
Yes.
and I'm surrounded by them, I really, I really look back at myself and see
Sure.
what I was caught into, and it's so frightening that I sometimes I just don't know what to do.
You're horrified, aren't
I am
you?
horrified.
Yes. And aren't you glad you got out as well as you did before it went too far? Before you got mixed up with someone who could have injured, physically maybe injured you or any other, scarred you any other way. Yes. Oh, excuse me.
No, I'm just thinking that I'm just trying to see how important it is to see psychopaths. I think when you probably see another person as a psychopath, it's kind of like a mirror. You've still got a lot of it in you. You're just seeing in you. If you get to the point that you don't have it in here, then perhaps, you won't even see it. You won't label it in another person. They're just there, but it doesn't make any difference. Whether if they do or don't do, they can't hurt you.
But I feel that you couldn't be there if you truly were really free.
Well, your whole social life changes. Where you are
Right.
physically
It
changes.
couldn't possibly be, if you see the psychopath in yourself and in someone.
There's nothing to do with it.
If you still have that in you and you don't free yourself, you're never going to get free. You're staying in that situation. You'll be just freed out of that situation
Yes.
when you're free.
We said this. Your
Very-
social relations
very
change.
wonderful thought.
It will change, yeah. When you change.
Right.
That's why it's frightening when you see those things in yourself, because it sometimes isn't as easy to see it in yourself unless it's projected in front of you by someone else. And then when you're pointing the arrow back and
Back.
you're looking at yourself, it horrifies you.
Yes, I should say. See, that's why we say quite strongly, certainly look at the other man, see how mad he is, then point it back.
Right.
Both ways, both ways. You are mad, I am mad. Not one without the other.
That's why.
But quickly.
Yeah, quick.
Yeah, just don't dwell on the other
No.
person, because then you're thinking that that's outside of you, and your whole world is with you.
You're blaming him and saying,
Yeah.
that's very good.
Just going back to what Rudy's question of why he was frightened, or that he was frightened, I think is best right back to your opening statement, in that how it would be to live without a set of standards, or without these images or ideals, and perhaps it's because he has built up within himself an image of what it would be to be relaxed with a girl of the opposite sex. And then if he feels that he isn't that image that he built up himself, well then he's out of tune, and this is where you just forget it. Just don't, there isn't, I mean, you don't have to be anything, just be you and relax, and the other person is equally in that same boat, and when you're both relaxed, life becomes wonderful.
That's very good, very good. Because he's living in a projection of how happier he'll be in an hour when he meets the girl,
Yeah.
which now he's in time and divided.
Or even if he's with the girl, he's got an image of how it would feel to be relaxed with a girl.
Yeah,
And he isn't that way, so he says, no, there's something's wrong.
yes, that's
And
right.
then
That's
you're
judgment.
frightened. Well, there isn't any that great way to feel relaxed with a girl. You got to be relaxed with yourself. And if they can come or go,
Right.
and you're going to be there with yourself always. And that's the first one you got to take and do. When you do that, then all your relationships become fine.
Right. Very good. See how it always comes back to what am I doing with myself instead of trying to persuade you or get rid of you? If I get rid of you and I'm still a psychopath, guess who I'm going to meet next?
I know.
Another one, huh?
Frightening.
Right? We at least see this much. Yeah. That's why, you have friends and you have relatives, and you see them going from one problem to another, just as we're discussing, because they don't see. And you also know there's not a word you can say to them, right? Nothing you can say to them. They're not going to hear you. I mentioned a while back to Bob, I believe it was, someone, when all our mind becomes, another benefit, when our mind becomes clear in these things, and we have a yearning for a certain person or a certain situation, certain event where I was the president of the company yesterday and now I'm not anymore, or I was with this beautiful girl yesterday and now I don't have her anymore. When I see, many things of course, but when I see this person as he or she really is, that he or she is really a very sick, neurotic human being, do you think I'm really going to yearn to get back with him again? With her again? But I didn't know it was that way because I didn't know that I was that way. Here's two neurotic people ruining each other, calling it romance and a beautiful relationship. And this is because we got emotional thrills, sexual thrills, social thrills, you name it, any kind of thrills out of it, which we called happiness, and which we called self-fulfillment. We didn't even know what self-finding meant, because we had, indeed, put all these labels on the outside of it. Boy, when I see you as you are and you see me, I'm speaking generally, and we're all sick, we want nothing to do with each other. We're divided. Any final comment before we end?
Yes. I have to see everything myself before I can see it in another person.
Right. Right.
I can't see the other person unless I see this thing for myself.
Which means you can't deceive yourself about yourself,
Right.
or you'll continue to deceive yourself about her.
Right.
So self-worth.
Copyright 1973. No portion of this material may be reproduced or sold without permission from Bruno Associates, Garden Grove, California.